Hi. You good? That's all I wrote. No period, no flourish, no desperate question mark. Just a plain message. The kind I've sent her 100 times, usually followed by a reply within minutes. Something casual like, just slammed at work. You okay? Or something sweeter. Missing you? Be home soon. This time, it just sat there. Sent. Delivered. Read. Then nothing. For the first few hours, I didn't think much of it. We all get busy. Maybe she was swamped. Maybe she read it while walking, then forgot to reply. Normal things. Human things. But as the hours stacked into a full day, and the days stretched into 3, something else took shape. Not quite panic. Not suspicion either. Just absence. And how loud it suddenly was. She was still active. That was the worst part. Instagram stories from brunch with friends. A video of her laughing as someone spilled a mimosa across a rooftop table. Tagged in a post from her coworker. My ride or shine. Love this woman. The woman she never really liked, as far as I knew. And in the comments, her replies, emojis, inside jokes, little flames and hearts and jokes I didn't get. Not because they were private, but because they didn't include me. She was communicating. Just not with me. By day 6, I stopped checking the thread. Not because I was over it, far from it, but because something about seeing the word, read, with no reply felt worse than just not knowing. It was deliberate, and that was what hurt. If you care, even a little, you reply. You explain. You reach out. You don't pretend like a message from your partner is background noise. We still lived together. That's what made it more twisted. She'd still come home. Still drop her keys on the same tray by the door, kick off her shoes, and walk past me on the couch like we hadn't skipped a beat. A quick smile. Sometimes a kiss on the forehead if she felt performative. But I knew it wasn't real anymore. It wasn't a fight. We hadn't screamed. There hadn't been any storm to weather. It was something colder, a silent migration of her attention. She hadn't left the house. She just stopped arriving in it. There's a strange thing that happens when someone goes quiet in your life without cause. You start talking to yourself, replaying conversations, rewriting moments, wondering if you missed something obvious. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and stare at the ceiling wondering if I'd said something, done something, or maybe not done enough. Then I'd remember the last real conversation we had, maybe 2 weeks ago. She was telling me about some articles she read on emotional labor, and how most men never realize how much their partners carry. I remember nodding, trying to listen, even if the language felt accusatory. I asked if that was something she felt from me. She just shrugged. I'm fine, she said, curling back into the couch. That I'm fine had an echo. I just didn't hear it until it came back as silence. By day 10, I stopped pretending. Not to her, she didn't ask. Not to myself, either. I wasn't going to chase someone who couldn't be bothered to reply to a message. But that didn't mean I was letting it slide. Detachment isn't weakness. Sometimes it's preparation. Quiet, methodical preparation. That was when I started noticing the small shifts. Not dramatic. Just subtle enough to be deniable. She started wearing perfume again. The one she used to say gave her headaches. She'd spritz it before leaving for work. Just a faint trail, but intentional. The kind of scent that stays on clothes and car seats. She started humming again, too. Not the songs we used to listen to. Not anything nostalgic. Just random tunes she didn't explain. Little melodies under her breath while she packed her bag or stirred her coffee. That wouldn't matter to anyone else. But it mattered to me. Because for a while, she hadn't sung anything. It wasn't sadness I felt, exactly. It was more like clarity. Like someone had flipped on a light I didn't know was off. I started watching more than I listened. I stopped asking if she was okay. She didn't want to tell me, so I gave her space. I gave her what she didn't ask for but clearly needed. And in that space, I started to shift. It wasn't pain that made me sharper. It was the realization that the woman in front of me was no longer trying to protect anything between us. When someone stops talking to you, I remembered, they're hoping you'll start talking to yourself. She wanted me to unravel first. That's what I realized. So I didn't. Instead, I paid attention. It would be another week before I found the first real clue. A mistake so small it shouldn't have mattered. A bar receipt left behind where it shouldn't be. A single transaction that shattered the last benefit of the doubt. But before that moment, there was just the silence, and the choice I made to hear it for what it really was. The morning she handed me the keys to her car, she was rushing. Hair still damp, phone already in hand, tapping out something with a kind of intensity that didn't match anything she'd ever texted me. She barely looked up. "Can you grab the big umbrella from the trunk? I think it's still in there from last weekend." Simple request. Ordinary morning. Except she flinched when I said, "Sure." It was a flicker, half a second, but I saw it. The way her shoulders tensed just before she masked it with a smile. She didn't tell me not to go. She didn't protest. But her body did. That's when I knew something was in the car that shouldn't be. I didn't rush. I didn't tear the car apart like a man in a panic. I opened the trunk calmly, reached for the umbrella, and let my eyes wander. A tote bag was wedged against the side, half-zipped. Nothing dramatic, just notebooks, pens, an old cardigan. But inside one of the side pockets, I found it, a receipt. Folded, slightly worn, tucked next to a hair tie and a tube of lip balm. 2 cocktails, 1 appetizer. A bar I knew for a fact she hated. Not just disliked, openly mocked. "The lighting's awful," she once told me. "And the music's always pretentious." That bar was 20 minutes from her office. Not walkable. Not random. You had to choose it. And that's what hit me hardest. Not the receipt itself, but the deliberate choice. A place she'd claimed to loathe, now good enough to sip cocktails and share appetizers in. With someone. She had told me the night before that she was working late. A networking dinner, she said. Last-minute invite. Would probably run long. She'd text me if it wrapped early, but not to wait up. I didn't wait up. I stopped doing that weeks ago. Still, the receipt was timestamped. 7:42 p.m. She hadn't been at a work dinner. She'd been at a bar she claimed to despise, ordering drinks she never mentioned, with someone she didn't want me to know about. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask who it was or why she lied. Instead, I folded the receipt carefully and slid it into my wallet. It wasn't just proof, it was pattern. I started paying attention to what she didn't say. She used to tell me everything. Boring meetings, coffee machine drama. The kind of minutiae that only someone in love would bother sharing. Lately, her updates were polished and vague. It was fine. Nothing major. Just the usual. She was managing her narrative. Curating it. At dinner that night, she was all soft eyes and wine talk. Told me we should try that new ramen place next weekend. I nodded and smiled and watched her carefully. Her phone buzzed once. She flipped it face down. Not the reaction of someone caught. The reaction of someone practiced. A week earlier, I might have believed the sudden affection was a thaw. A turning point. But now, it felt rehearsed. Like she'd realized she'd drifted too far and needed to reel me back in. That night, I remembered the last time we'd had dinner together. Really had dinner. Just the two of us. It had been 2 months earlier, maybe more. I'd made reservations at her favorite spot, even wore the shirt she liked. She spent most of the meal staring past me, chewing slowly, phone always within reach. Said she was just tired. I didn't push. But now I realized that tiredness was selective. This new energy, the curated charm, it wasn't for me. It was maintenance, keeping the lie functional. Keeping the version of herself I still believed in close enough to use, but distant enough not to feel guilty. I didn't rage. I didn't withdraw. I did what I've always done when something doesn't add up. I watched. The receipt wasn't a bombshell. It was a whisper. And whispers, when you collect enough of them, start to scream. The next morning, I rearranged the bookshelf in our study, not for any real reason, just a nervous tick. That's when I found the journal page. It was torn, crumpled, stuffed between 2 hardcovers like a makeshift bookmark. Her handwriting, fast, cramped. A single quote circled twice. "You owe yourself the love you keep trying to give others." Underneath it, a date, last month. And beneath that, a name. One I didn't recognize. Not a coworker. Not a friend. Not family. Just a name. First and last. Scribbled in her handwriting like it meant something. Maybe a speaker from a workshop. Maybe a therapist. Maybe something else entirely. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it carefully and slid it into the same spot in my wallet as the receipt. I didn't need to know everything. Not yet, but I needed to remember the feeling. The slow, unmistakable realization that the person you share a bed with has already emotionally packed up and left. No accusations, no scenes, just quiet preparation. Because when someone stops protecting the relationship, you don't beg them to stay. You start getting ready to leave. Well, I didn't follow her. I didn't install any tracking apps, didn't scroll through her phone when she showered. There's a kind of desperation in that kind of search, and I wasn't there, not yet. I wasn't trying to catch her. I was trying to understand how I had missed the beginning of the end. So instead of surveillance, I studied the glitches. Humans don't fall out of love in one clean snap. It frays, shifts, rewrites itself subtly enough that you almost miss it, unless you know what to watch for. She used to hate strong perfume. Said it gave her headaches, made her feel like she was walking through a department store. So when I caught the scent of it on her coat one morning, subtle but unmistakable, it stood out. New scent? I asked, sipping my coffee, keeping my tone flat. She blinked, shrugged. It's just something I had in the back of the drawer. Trying it again. Like it was a pair of heels, not a signature change. That same week, 2 new blouses showed up in the laundry. Not her usual style. Not loungewear, not office basics. These were curated, fitted, intentional. Clothes worn for being seen. I said nothing. Let it stack. Then there were the phone calls. She always used to talk to her sister while cooking or folding laundry, speaker on, multitasking. Lately, she took calls facing the window, phone to ear, quiet, sometimes laughing, sometimes just murmuring low and quick, the way people do when they're telling stories they don't want heard. One night, she stepped into the hallway mid-call and didn't come back for 20 minutes. When she returned, her face was flushed. She muttered something about work drama and changed the subject. I nodded, asked if she wanted tea. She smiled like nothing was wrong. But something was, and it wasn't just what she was doing. It was how comfortable she was doing it. She wasn't hiding anything in the frantic way guilty people do. She was calm, settled. That's how I knew this wasn't new. One night, while organizing the shelf in the guest room, a task I gave myself just to stay in motion, I found a novel I'd been meaning to finish. I flipped through it, checking where I'd left off. Halfway through, a scrap of paper fell out. It was the journal page again, the torn one I'd found before. Only now, it made more sense. She had used it as a bookmark. That wasn't random. No one tears a quote out of a journal unless it means something. I looked at the circled words again. You owe yourself the love you keep trying to give others. The quote wasn't about healing. It was justification, permission, a kind of mental prenup for whatever emotional cheating came next. Beneath the quote, the name still sat there, first and last. It was unusual enough that I remembered it. I searched it later, not obsessively, just enough to know. A few LinkedIn hits, a blog, one photo, a self-proclaimed transformational coach, private retreats, group healing, holistic expansion, all the language people use when they're trying to rebrand themselves from the inside out. She'd never mentioned him, never brought up a retreat. But 2 days later, she dropped the phrase, radical accountability, during dinner. I raised an eyebrow. She laughed. Just something I heard on a podcast, but I'd already seen it, on a flyer tucked into his website. A weekend retreat. Same date as her supposed trip to visit college friends. I didn't say a word. She didn't know I'd found it. She didn't know I had the receipt, or the journal page, or her sudden scent change filed away like a case I hadn't finished prosecuting yet. Because this wasn't about proof. It was about the slow disintegration of a woman I had loved, and how she was trying to exit without saying goodbye. What stunned me more than anything was how lazy it all was. It wasn't that she was reckless. It was that she no longer cared if I noticed. The woman who once asked if I was mad just because I blinked too slowly after a long day had now stopped watching me entirely. That's what made it unforgivable. Not the betrayal itself, but the fact that she thought I wouldn't see it coming. The first time I heard the phrase again, I was at a casual networking mixer, nothing formal, just local business types sipping watered-down drinks and swapping polite bragging. I wasn't even planning to go, but I showed up anyway. Needed the distraction. Needed to be in a room where people didn't know what my home sounded like at 2 a.m. A friend of hers was there. Not a close one, more like a satellite from her yoga group. We'd spoken a few times, enough for her to smile and say, "Oh hey, how's everything?" I gave her the standard, "All good," and let her talk. That's when it slipped. She mentioned how inspired she was by what my wife had said about radical accountability, how she'd never heard the phrase until that retreat. I smiled, nodded, didn't correct her, because now I had confirmation. She hadn't just gone to that retreat. She'd spoken about it, bragged about it, framed it as personal growth, the kind you reference in passing but actually believe redeems the damage. That night, I pulled up her Instagram and went further back than I had before. Not the obvious posts, not the selfies or quotes. I looked at the photos with too many people. Group shots. Landscapes. The ones meant to distract you with beauty. And there he was. Not front and center, that would have been too risky. But barely visible in the corner of a girls' weekend post. Glass in hand. Sunglasses. Talking to someone cropped halfway out of frame. It was the same man from the retreat website. The one from the journal page. The coach. She'd captioned the photo something bland and cheerful. Hearts full. Memories made. All the cliches people use when they're manufacturing nostalgia in real time. I sat there staring at it for a long time. Not because I couldn't believe it, I already did, but because it was all so painfully predictable. A curated descent into selfishness disguised as self-discovery. And yet the part of me that still remembered how she used to curl into my chest during thunderstorms, the part that knew how she took her coffee and what songs made her cry, that part was still hoping I was wrong. It was around this time that I stopped feeling heartbroken. What I felt instead was insulted. Not because she'd found someone else, but because she thought I wouldn't notice. Because she thought I was the kind of man who could be left in the background like an old coat she didn't want to throw out yet. She didn't cut me out, I thought to myself, staring at the post. She filed me away like a receipt she didn't need anymore. The image stayed burned in my mind. Not just his face, but the easy smile she wore, the one she hadn't used around me in months. A woman performing joy in someone else's world while leaving our life behind one muted step at a time. I didn't block her. Didn't even unfollow. I wanted to see the whole unraveling. That's when I started preparing in earnest. Because if someone thinks they're leaving you quietly, the most powerful thing you can do is let them keep believing it, while you get 10 steps ahead. I always knew she had ambition, not in the loud, career-climbing way, but in the quietly curated, image-conscious way. She liked the idea of becoming someone. Not in a room full of power brokers, just in a room full of admiration. The kind that claps when you say you've grown, even if you've only shed your consequences. So when I got the call from my banker, a quiet man who speaks in near whispers and only calls when something doesn't sit right, I knew before he finished his sentence. She's been asking about moving some of her personal funds, he said. Nothing illegal. Just methodical. Small withdrawals. Quiet transfers, all under limits that would raise no flags. But taken as a pattern, it wasn't personal budgeting. It was pre-exit maneuvering. She wasn't just planning to leave me. She was preparing to survive after she did. I asked him to flag anything unusual. Nothing more. I didn't want to spook her. The goal wasn't to stop her. It was to know the exact shape of the damage before it landed. That night, while she soaked in a lavender bath, the kind she never used to take when we were happy, I went to my office and opened our shared business files. Nothing dramatic. Just a review. A gut check. What I found stopped me cold. Quiet edits in the back end of our brand registry. Legal paperwork adjusted. Nothing stolen, not yet, but rebranded. Slowly. Strategically. She had created a second entity under a new name. Nearly identical. Same logo, same design language. Except this version had her as the sole founder. She'd copied the skeleton of our company and slipped it into her own closet. No password hacking. No break-ins. It was all legal. All technical. All clever. She hadn't broken the rules. She'd just rewritten them while I was sleeping beside her. It felt less like betrayal and more like a hostile acquisition. Not by someone ruthless. That would have made it cleaner. It was worse because it was done by someone who knew me intimately. Someone who knew where I'd look, when I wouldn't, and how long I'd hesitate before I called it what it was. She didn't break up with me, I thought, staring at the screen. She just rewrote the credits. The next week, I moved quietly. Contacted an old colleague, someone we'd both once considered bringing on as a silent investor. I pitched him the opportunity. Full exit. My share cleanly sold. All documentation in order. Non-disclosure ironclad. He accepted within 2 days. By the time she noticed, I was already out. She only realized it weeks later, when she tried to access something I no longer had to approve. She came into the living room holding her phone, brows pinched. Hey, did you make some changes to the company profile? I didn't look up from my laptop, just sipped my coffee. I gave you space, I said quietly, before you even asked for it. Her mouth opened. closed, opened again. I don't understand. You do, I said, setting the cup down. You just didn't think I would. And that was the beginning of her unraveling. Because people like her don't break things in one clean blow. They erode you piece by piece, expecting you to fall apart before they do. But this time, I didn't. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Ordinary light filtered through the curtains, the kind that makes everything look softer than it deserves. She was at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with that familiar half-smile, the one she used to give me when we first started dating. Except now, it belonged to her screen. Coffee brewed in the background. She tapped out a message, probably something light-hearted and flirty, then sipped her drink and hummed to herself. I stood there for a moment, letting the quiet wrap around me. It was the last time I'd let myself see her as she used to be, or rather, as I used to believe she was. Then I placed the envelope on the table. She looked up, smile still half-formed, until she saw the way I stood. Until she saw the envelope, her phone stilled in her hand. What's this? Her voice was calm. Too calm. I didn't sit. I didn't need to. Inside the envelope, the bar receipt, the flyer from the retreat, a printout of the Instagram post, the one with her coach barely visible in the background, and the torn journal page, with his name circled under that quote she'd once called beautiful. On top of it all, a single note in my handwriting. You said you needed space. I gave it to you before you even asked. She didn't open the envelope right away. She stared at it like it might burn her fingers. Then she flicked her eyes back up to me. What is this? My voice was steady. It's what I've known. What you didn't have the decency to say. She blinked. For a moment, I thought she might admit it outright, just surrender. But she didn't. Of course she didn't. It's not what you think, she said, reaching for the envelope. Her fingers shook slightly. I said nothing. She opened it, looked at the receipt first, then the flyer. Her mouth twitched, not quite a frown, not quite a smirk. Defensive posture kicking in. I was figuring things out, she said carefully. You don't understand what I've been going through. The pressure. This isn't pressure, I said, stepping closer. This is premeditated, she tried again. It's not black and white. I've been doing a lot of work on myself. The retreat helped me see how much I've been neglecting my needs. I never wanted to hurt you, I cut her off. You didn't ghost me, I said. You ghosted us. In our own home. Her face flushed. I was confused. No, I said quietly. You were calculated. The silence stretched. She dropped the envelope back onto the table like it was tainted. Her hands moved to her temples, pressing in as if trying to hold something together. Her voice rose, brittle and defensive. This isn't fair. You're turning this into some kind of betrayal when it's just me finally figuring out who I am. I didn't flinch. My voice stayed even, steady. Then you should have left, I said, my eyes on her, not the mess she'd made. But you didn't want to lose what I'd built while you figured out who you wanted to be. Her voice cracked. She looked down for a beat, then back up, eyes glossy now. I didn't plan for it to go this way. I didn't mean. I stepped forward, not to threaten, just to make sure every word landed. But you did plan it, I said. The edits. The new entity. The coach. The rebrand. You were building your new life with pieces from the one I gave you. Her face hardened, composure slipping fast. She straightened, almost daring me to flinch. So what? You want revenge? You want to make me feel small? Go ahead. I looked at her for a long moment. I don't need to make you feel anything, I said. I just needed you to see what you've already become. She looked down, for the first time, truly looked ashamed. I walked to the door, picked up the small overnight bag I'd packed earlier. You won't hear from me, I said. No fights. No games. Just silence, the same kind you gave me. She whispered something I didn't catch. I didn't ask her to repeat it. I walked out. I didn't text her. Didn't call. Didn't ask if she was okay. She'd already answered that question when she left my message on read for 10 days while publicly performing joy for an audience I wasn't invited to. So I gave her what she wanted, silence. That was 6 weeks ago. She launched the new brand 3 weeks after I left. It looked exactly like our old one, except with the words, radical healing, slapped onto everything like a rebranding pitch from someone who read half a marketing book. Same fonts, same mission statement. Even the same slogan, the one I'd spent an entire weekend crafting 3 years earlier while she slept beside me. She posted the announcement like a sunrise, smiling in a white linen dress, somewhere coastal, barefoot, excited to begin this next chapter. Letting go of what no longer aligns, letting go. That was rich, coming from someone who packed a parachute behind my back and then jumped without warning. But she'd missed something. One detail. One crucial, legal mistake. She never filed a name change on the trademark. I still owned it. Not just the logo, the slogan, the digital assets, the commercial rights. All notarized, all dated 6 months before her silent exit began. She thought I'd walk away from everything. She was wrong. When her retreat venue got a cease and desist letter, I imagined the panic set in fast. Not because of me, I hadn't spoken a word, but because everything she thought she'd taken was never hers to begin with. Sponsorships pulled out. The wellness influencers she partnered with deleted their collab post. A few quiet murmurs online started surfacing. One from a woman who tagged the coach, the same man I'd found circled in her journal page, and accused him of running emotional entanglements with multiple attendees. I didn't comment, didn't share. I didn't need to. She messaged me once. "Why would you do this to me?" No punctuation. Just that one line. I didn't respond. I sent back a PDF of the original trademark registration, highlighted, dated, stamped, then left her on. Scene. Funny how fast ghosts start chasing you back when they realize you weren't supposed to disappear, just evolve. My phone stayed quiet after that. I suspect pride kept her from trying again. Or maybe she finally understood that I hadn't done this to her. She'd done it to herself, while I simply chose not to carry her forward when she let go of me in stages. I still think about her sometimes, not with longing, not even with anger, mostly with quiet clarity. There are bruises that don't show, but you feel them every time you take a step. That's what this was, not a break, just a permanent tenderness where something once stood solid. I moved into a smaller place. Nothing flashy, just mine, clean lines, fewer photos. Thank you for watching. Bye.